Everywhere that Jesus went, crowds followed him, begging for him to heal them, wanting to hear him preach. He left the Jewish countryside and that was around the Sea of Galilee, and he went away for just a few days over to the coast to a Phoenician city, Tyre, for a break. He wanted just a few days of peace and quiet.
Jesus went to the regions of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman from those territories came out and shouted, "Show me mercy, Son of David. My daughter is suffering terribly from demon possession." But he didn't respond to her at all. His disciples came and urged him, "Send her away. She keeps shouting out after us." Jesus replied, "I've been sent only to the lost sheep, the people of Israel." But she knelt before him and said, "Lord, help me." He replied, "It is not good to take the children's bread and toss it to dogs." She said, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall off their master's table." Jesus answered, "Woman, you have a great faith. It will be just as you wish." And right then, her daughter was healed.
So I wonder sometimes if Jesus was ever afraid. You know, I know from the scriptures, from what Ken just read, I know that Jesus got tired and cranky. Jesus, the one that we began singing in our worship about, "Jesus, you are all compassion." Jesus got tired and he needed some peace and quiet. And a woman, an unnamed woman, came to him in tears. Her young daughter was in pain by dis-ease and forces that were beyond her control. I'm going to tell you as a parent, if kids have ever been in surgery or they've been sick, I can relate. You know that Canaanite woman's fear in that moment. And you know that you would do anything to take their suffering on yourself to make them well. And this woman has shed her pride and has come to Jesus in her naked need, with tears, begging to help her, while he's on vacation. And the disciples just want Jesus to make her go away. Jesus has already done so much. He's been at it without a break for too long. He hasn't been taking his Sabbath rest. He's been healing on Sabbath. There's just so many people. He's done. There's nothing left in the tank. And he looks at his group, at Peter and James and John, and he knows they need a break too. They've been stretched to their limit. And maybe he's afraid. Maybe he's afraid that they're just going to up and leave. They're done. And now he has an outsider, a non-Jew, asking them to work on their vacation. And so Jesus opens up his mouth and he says to this woman, "Look, we've never done it that way before." He says that. Now he uses different words. He says it like this: "I've only been sent to the lost sheep, the people of Israel, which you are not, just like all the prophets and the Messiah. I've only been sent to the respectable people, God's people." But this woman, even as upset as she is, she isn't done. She gets on her knees and simply prays to him, Lord, help me. And Jesus, through all his exhaustion, his crankiness, Jesus gets mean. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. You read it. Jesus says, it's not fair to take the children's food and toss it to the dogs. Now, I've had people who have told me, okay, he's not calling her a dog really because they're trying to help Jesus save face. And so that they don't say that Jesus uses the word for a mean dog. He doesn't use the word for feral dog in Greek. He actually uses a nicer word. It's a diminutive word for puppy or house dog or something like that. So if that makes it easier for you to think that Jesus called her a chihuahua, go ahead, if that works for you. But it doesn't matter because she persisted. This unnamed woman makes a name for herself. She has a sense of humor. And she comes back at him. I imagine she has kind of a glint in her eye. And she looks at him and she puts it this way. Even those puppies that you're hating on, they're smarter than you think. They're worthy. They sit right underneath the toddler's high chair because they know. And in that moment, she saves Jesus. She reminds him who he is and why he's come. I believe that this is the most pivotal moment in Jesus' ministry. Because everything changes after this moment for him. So you do this in Bible study sometimes. You ask, who are you in the story? And you put yourself in the place of the people in the story. So who are you in this story? Are you closer to the Canaanite woman? Maybe you've been told that you're just too much. You're too poor, too gay, too young, too old, too brown, too uneducated, too single, too divorced, too broken to think that you really have a place in the so-called house of God. People treat their dogs better than you've been treated. And some of you, yay, you get to be Jesus. But for all the wrong reasons. We're Jesus because we let someone down who needed us. We didn't mean to. We're just so tired. But we did. We were scared. We just wanted some peace and quiet. This last week, over on Roe, I was driving down and I drove past the building of Faith Lutheran Church. It's quiet there now. I used to go in there. The boys used to have piano lessons there. It's quiet now. It's boarded up. Lutheran. That name, it was at the beginning of the Reformation 500 years ago. It was where the fire got lit. Now it's quiet. It's boarded up and preparing to be torn down. Along the way, the Reformation fire went out. We forgot that along the way, that every time that 2 or 3 of us are gathered, we are the body of Christ. And we bear a responsibility in who we are, whose we claim to be the living presence of God in this world that needs it. And when we fail to show love, for whatever reason, we make Christ look bad. We knew strength once before. Just here in this little branch of Colonial Church, there were days where the membership rolls were full and the pews were full, and we listed membership at over 800 people. And those were the days where every respectable person belonged to a church. But those days did not last. We thought that it was about building institutions, but it was always about building disciples. Those days were an anomaly, a moment. But church is a living and a breathing creature, not an institution. We are breathing, literally co-conspiring with God. And these last 50 years have been a long exhale. And things quieted. Most of the respectable people were gone. Some of them moved to other places, and some went to the grave. And around the nation, all that was left behind was a faithful remnant. But something is happening, and I see it beginning to happen. Something is beginning to stir. You see, I'm getting to the point, not there entirely yet, but I'm getting to the point where I'm kind of glad that the respectable church is going away. Because in the name of respectability, many were consigned to the crumbs from the table, or even felt barred from the house of God. People had to hide whole parts of themselves to fit in. Abuse, race, addictions, illness, mental illness, gender. Anything that wasn't deemed respectable or decent was covered up. The naked needs of people were shunned in the name of respectability. So I want to make a confession this morning. A few years ago, not too long after I was called to serve this community, I was invited by one of our church groups. It was Jane Kurtz. It was Jane Kurtz. She invited me to a fundraiser that was a night of dancing at a bar. I didn't go. Now, it's been long enough now that I honestly don't remember what reason I gave for not going. And I'm sure it was legitimate. I'm not a liar. I'm sure that there was a legitimate reason, but there was a truth also behind my reason. I was afraid. You see, I don't dance for good reason. I look stupid. I don't like it. I am an embarrassment to my children. The truth is that I was too worried about looking respectable because I'm the minister after all. I gotta have an office, right? And sometimes I feel like that puts me on a stage. Literally, they put me on a stage. And the thing about a stage is that it elevates some people, but not all. And behind every stage, there is a backstage. And it's all the stuff that we don't want people to see because it's a mess. Now, I will tell you, Linda has that mess as whipped into shape as you can possibly get it. Hope is on it. That is a nice looking room as far as the backstage goes. But it's all that stuff that we try to hide in order to look respectable. We've lived church like it's a stage sometimes. But God is breathing in. And church is changing. And the time for the stage is ending. So what if we came into church like the Canaanite woman? We come in our naked need instead of our pretense. What if we tore off the veneer of respectability and came to worship like that? Came to worship a God like that? Why do we now start with a time of confession? Because now is the time when we bring our stories, who we really are, to God. And we do that in spirit and in truth. And then we hear a word of grace. That is where Molly, and I think she's right on to it, that's where the church is going. 500 years ago, it was all about what we believed about God. Now it's about who we are, who we truly are, broken and incredibly beautiful. In communities that celebrate the inherent goodness that God's Spirit has put inside of every human being. We are parents who are struggling to find out how to raise kids when the playbook got thrown out. We're the elderly who are very aware that we're not remembering as well as we used to. We are the socially awkward who could really use a bath. We are the gays, lesbians, bisexual, transgender, and queer who want more than just to be tolerated, because who cares about that? You want to be embraced. We are agnostics, wondering about truth. We are physically disabled, for whom it took a long time to get out of bed this morning. We are those who have been abused and long to be out of the valley of the shadow of fear. We are the church breathing in new life and shedding respectability and praying honestly, Lord, help me. This is the church at the beginning of the next 500 years. The Holy Spirit is humbling us, taking us off stages. The Holy Spirit is bringing unrespectable people, even kind of scary ones. She's doing that. Watch her. Those who had hoped, or even given up hope, or maybe never wanted hope, that the crumbs would fall off the table, those people will become the guests of honor in this community we call church. They will be leaders. Do you hear an ounce of hope in this? If so, murmur to yourself, amen. Do you think that the world needs this kind of church in the future? If so, say amen. Do you want to be part of the change that is coming, or does it scare you a bit? It does me. If so, say amen. Because when it comes down to it, one thing that is purely obvious to me is I'm going to have to get off the stage a bit. And I'm going to have to dance. Dance in all of my glorious awkwardness and lack of grace. Because we are in this dance together. And everyone can dance. No matter what your physical limitations are, if you can do this, you can dance. It's all you got to do. God made you to dance. So be brave now. So whether you're sitting down or standing up if you'd like, give your head a little wiggle. Get those hands moving. If King David do it, I can do it.